Kentucky, a rainy evening. The diner nearly empty. Young waitress Lena, 28, moved briskly about, tidying up at the close of her shift, her weary eyes still gentle despite the long day. Outside, a neon sign flickered, casting broken shadows across the worn linoleum floor. The door creaked open. An older man with a gray beard and a bandaged leg stepped in, wearing a drenched, worn-out military coat. His trembling hands clutched a weathered soldier's cap. Rain dripped from his lined face onto the ground, forming tiny puddles that echoed the sorrow in his eyes. Lena walked over quietly, her voice gentle as she asked, "Can I help you, sir?" She noticed the military insignia on his coat, faded, but unmistakably present. The old man spoke in barely more than a whisper. "Just a cup of hot water, please. And if you have any leftover breadcrumbs, I'd be thankful for all my days." His voice broke slightly, a man clearly not used to asking for kindness. His eyes, once lit by youth and bravery, now only showed hunger and humility. Lena could see the pride he still carried, his back upright despite the visible pain in his leg. His hands, scarred and rough, told stories of sacrifice that words never would. Lena stepped quietly into the kitchen and returned shortly with a hot, full plate. "A returned order, still warm," she explained with a small smile. She added a cup of coffee and some extra butter for the bread. "The coffee's on the house," she murmured, careful not to be overheard. The veteran's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, miss. You remind me of my wife when she was young. She used to do this for strangers, always said, 'Everyone deserves warmth, especially those who've known too much cold.'" He touched a worn wedding ring, turning it slowly. Suddenly, the diner owner appeared, his expression souring at the sight. He shouted from across the room, "I've warned you before, this isn't a soup kitchen." His voice echoed against the walls, drawing glances from the few remaining diners. The old man flinched, dropping his cap, struggling to rise despite his injury. Lena moved between them, voice calm but firm. "I'll pay with my tips, sir." She reached for her wallet, resolve in her gaze. The owner slammed his fist on the counter, the thud resounding through the hushed diner. "You're fired, right now. Gather your things and leave." Spittle flew as he barked the words. He gestured toward the exit. The few patrons in the diner pretended not to notice, concentrating hard on their food. One woman even leaned toward her friend and whispered just loudly enough for Lena to catch. "That's what happens when you bring in trouble. You get what's coming to you." No one rose, no one spoke up. The silence of decent people enabling injustice weighed more heavily than the downpour outside. Lena stepped out into the storm, holding her bag close, her hair stuck to her forehead, her pride unbroken, but her job gone. The neon light's reflection flickered in the puddles under her feet as she walked away without turning around. The elderly veteran limped after her and pressed something into her hand, a weathered military dog tag. "You just helped a broken soul, child," he said softly, before vanishing into the rain. The metal was strangely warm in her palm, despite the chill. Back in her cramped apartment, Lena toweled off the stray cat she'd been caring for, a one-eyed tabby that had shown up at her window 3 months earlier. She checked her bank balance on her battered phone screen. Exactly $42 left. Rent was due in 10 days. Her fingers quivered slightly, but she lifted her chin, just like the old man had. By sunrise, a clip of her being dismissed had gone viral on local social media, caught on a teen's cell phone. The shaky video showed her standing tall while the owner shouted, but instead of sympathy, most comments defended the business. "Rules exist for a reason," one said. "She should have asked first," another wrote. "Maybe she's been stealing food the whole time," sneered a particularly harsh commenter. Old colleagues unfriended her on Facebook. One so-called friend sent a private message. "Always trying to be the hero, huh? How's that going now? Some of us need jobs more than we need applause." Lena submitted applications at 3 other diners. All turned her down. "We don't want the media drama," a manager admitted. "It's nothing personal, but some people attract problems." Another didn't even let her finish the form, sliding it back across the counter with a tight-lipped smile. In a tiny cafe downtown, when Lena softly offered to help clear tables, The owner looked at her, recognition flickering in his eyes, then wordlessly shook his head. The door shut in her face before she could speak further. That night she wandered the downtown streets, fingering the dog tag in her jacket pocket, reading the name etched in metal. Rutherford Michael J. She wondered about his journey, where he'd been, what he'd witnessed, how he came to live on the streets despite everything he'd given, the sacrifices of so many fading so quickly from memory. She saw him then curled up at a bus stop, trying to stay dry beneath a torn sheet of plastic, his leg bandaged and stretched out, his face troubled. Even in slumber, Lena stepped closer quietly, leaving a small parcel wrapped in newspaper beside him. Half a sandwich she couldn't afford to give but couldn't bring herself to keep. Just as she turned to go, a black military truck came to a halt at the corner. The uniformed driver locked eyes with Lena, then made a phone call, speaking urgently into the line. She walked away quickly, wondering if even this small gesture of kindness would somehow come back to haunt her. Forgive me, viewers. It's hard to go on. A young woman pays the price simply for offering a meal to someone in need. If your heart feels heavy, type UNFAIR. So compassion isn't erased. The following morning, the quiet town buzzed with whispers. 200 soldiers dressed in full formal uniforms stood in perfect ranks outside the diner. Each motionless, eyes forward, expressions grave. Bystanders slowed, raising phones to capture the surreal sight, the sunlight reflecting off medals and badges. Leading them was Colonel James Rutherford, a veteran of 3 deployments, and as would soon be revealed, the son of the elderly man from the day before. His face bore the same resolute look Lena had seen in the older veteran. With calm, deliberate steps, he stepped inside the diner, asking to speak with the owner. The manager emerged from the back, pale and stammering. I didn't realize who he was. His fingers twisted, his apron, eyes shifting to the soldiers outside. Colonel Rutherford's tone remained steady, but carried undeniable authority. You didn't need to know his name, but the man you turned away saved my life in Iraq in 2007, along with 12 others when our convoy was attacked. He dragged me 3 miles while wounded himself. Local journalists had arrived by now. The moment streaming live across the region, phones captured every reaction, every word. The hashtag #, veteran dishonored, began trending rapidly. Michael Rutherford was awarded the Silver Star for bravery. The colonel went on, pulling a framed commendation from under his arm. After my mother passed, he battled PTSD, refused our support, said others needed help. More, we've been looking for him for 8 months. The owner's face went ghostly as he absorbed the scale of what he'd done outside. The crowd of bystanders had swelled, many displaying expressions of revulsion aimed at the business. Some held up quickly made signs that read, "Honor our veterans," and "No service here." Lena was contacted and asked to come to the diner. When she arrived, all 200 service members simultaneously raised their hands in salute, a moment that moved everyone present to tears. The sound of 200 hands snapping to foreheads in perfect synchrony echoed down the block. Colonel Rutherford gave a subtle bow. "You are the reason my father lived another night," he said, "and you remind us who we truly serve." He presented her with a Medal of Honor, not her own, but his father's, which the older man had pawned months earlier to buy food for a homeless family with kids. "He always said medals don't fill empty stomachs," the colonel explained, his voice finally faltering, "but they should remind those who wear them what they represent." He placed the medal in Lena's hand, gently closing her fingers around it. The diner owner immediately faced repercussions. Patrons initiated a boycott, employees quit in protest, and suppliers became hesitant to deliver. Local veteran organizations posted notices outside his shop. A business built over a decade and a half fell apart in a single day. Throughout it all, Lena stayed silent. She gave a single nod, clutching the dog tags in her hand, and walked away from the cameras and spotlight, her quiet grace speaking louder than any statement could have. A week later, a young boy stepped into the new community kitchen where Lena now worked as manager, a role offered by a coalition of veteran-owned businesses that had reached out after the viral video. He placed a crumpled dollar bill and a homemade cookie on the counter. "I saw you in the video," he said seriously. "Can this help someone else? My grandpa was a soldier too." Lena smiled, brushing away a tear, and placed her hand over her heart, a gesture that needed no words. The child's simple offering meant more than all the attention that followed. Outside, an American flag waved proudly, a gift from the veterans who now volunteered there alongside her. Across town, the old diner stood abandoned, a for lease sign dangling in the window, a quiet symbol of consequence. Michael Rutherford, now receiving proper care and housing, sat at a corner table, sharing stories with young soldiers who came to hear tales of real courage, not just from distant wars, but from everyday moments where standing for dignity made all the difference. His son visited often, making up for time lost. Some carry honor quietly. They seek no applause. But when they're disrespected, a society's true values are exposed. You might forget this story by next week, but if no one retells it, history will stay silent. Subscribe to QH, remarkable stories where justice, compassion, and memory are upheld to the very end. I told you we don't serve beggars here.